called me from the ashes, you have broken every curse. Blessed Redeemer, you have set this captive free. Lord, I can't help but sing. Faithful you are, faithful forever you will be. Faithful you are. All your promises are yes and amen. All your promises are yes and amen. I will rest in your promises. My confidence is your faithfulness. I will rest in your promises. My confidence is your faithfulness. I will rest in your promises. My confidence is your faithfulness. I will rest in your promises. My confidence is your faithfulness. Faithful you are, faithful forever you will be. Faithful you are. All your promises are yes and amen. All your promises are yes and amen. Who am I that the highest King would welcome me? I was lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. Free at last he has ransomed me. His grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, he died for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am.
Welcome back to this series of Mighty Men and Wise Women. I invite you to open your Bibles to the book of Ruth as we continue following in Ruth's sandals to learn, in this case, about wise women. Ruth is an amazing example of someone who chooses the wisdom that comes from God. Now, the bonus in this, if you will, as we're learning about Boaz, we're also finding a mighty man as well. Now, where we are so far is in Ruth chapter 2. We have seen Naomi's faith and how that has developed Ruth as a Moabitess, right? So it's unusual that she would know anything about the Lord or Jehovah or Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So she has gotten that from Naomi. And even though Naomi's had a hard time, certainly, we have noticed how Naomi over and over and over references God and gives God credit for the bad and the good, but she thus recognizes that the Lord is sovereign, that He's in charge, and that is a powerful thing. So it just so happens, in other words, by the Lord's leading, that Ruth ends up gleaning from Boaz's field and meets him. And we talked about how powerful, how mighty Boaz is in his faith and relationship with the Lord. As he sees her, he recognizes this foreign young woman and then takes care of her, makes sure that his servants treat her well. In fact, in verse 14 of chapter 2, Boaz is told to sit along with the rest of his servants. So in verse 14, she sits by the reapers, and he served her roasted grain. Boaz served her until she had all that she needed, and then he tells his servants in the end of verse 15, let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not insult her. She's a foreigner. She's a Moabitess. She's the sworn enemy of the people of Israel. And he says, don't you insult her. He is a man of great strength and of great influence, and he uses that to protect her. Verse 16, he says, and you shall purposely pull out for her some grain from the bundles and leave it so that she may glean, and do not rebuke her. So, protect her, do not insult her, provide for her, and do not rebuke her. And that's a word that means to correct from a position of power or authority. And he says, don't talk to her like that. In other words, don't talk down to her. And so we noticed how Boaz is so powerful in a godly sense. He is so kind, he's so righteous, he's so protective. But we mentioned how when you go to Matthew chapter 1 and you read through the genealogy of Christ, that Boaz is in that genealogy, and you remember his mother was Rahab, which means no wonder Boaz has a willingness to notice foreigners, and why he would humble himself to serve her, who would be considered like the Samaritan woman later in John chapter 4. But the Moabitess would be like one of the least humans on the planet to the Israelites. She's a woman, she's a Moabitess, she's a widow, she's childless, she's penniless. She's got to be one of the lowest rungs of society, and Boaz serves her in front of everyone else. And he also is going to be more prone to say, don't you insult her. Well, he may have grown up hearing such things in connection to his own mother. So where we got to then in our study so far is all the way down to verse 19. So Ruth comes home. Not only is she okay, and she's been fed, but she comes home with additional food that is going to provide for her and, of course, for her mother-in-law, Naomi. And so Naomi is amazed because this has gone so well. So verse 19, here's what Naomi says. Where did you glean today, and where did you work? May he who took notice of you be blessed. That's not a random blessing. In just a moment, she will describe again how the Lord is the source of all blessings. So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked and said, the name of the man with whom I work today is Boaz. Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, may he be blessed of the Lord. look at how frequently the Lord's name comes off of Naomi's lip. This is the name of God. This is the I am. This is the one specifically God says you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And so again, just reevaluating Naomi's faith is the Lord's name is always on her lips. And she recognizes here again that the Lord himself is the source of every blessing. May he be blessed of the Lord who has not withdrawn his kindness to the living and to the dead. Well, that includes her husband and her sons. And she describes the Lord as giving kindness, even in that matter, which is amazing. And it may also indicate how, like the rest of us, Naomi is working through her faith. While it is painful, I can't imagine, she still trusts in the Lord and is beginning to see blessings even from such difficulties or from such pain. Now, Naomi also says something really unique, really interesting. When again Naomi said to her, this man is our relative, okay, he's family, and he is one of our closest relatives, is the way this translation uses or turns the phrase, closest relatives. Now that keys something because verse 21, well, then Ruth goes on, the Moabitess goes on to say, furthermore, he said to me, you shall stay close to my servants until they have finished all my harvest. Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it is good, my daughter. Now you notice, daughter, that you go out with his maids so that others do not fall upon you in another field. Remember, this was risky. It is risky that Naomi recognizes that Ruth has no protection at all. And so it's gone well, and this is a good thing. She sees the hand of God in this. Stay with it. Verse 23, so she stayed close by the maids of Boaz in order to glean until the end of the barley harvest and the wheat harvest, so it extends, and she lived with her mother-in-law. Now, Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, shall I not seek security for you that it may go well with you? Because what happens after the harvest? So right now that's working. She's able to, I probably need to take a breath and slow down here a little bit. I'm excited about what's in this text that we're going to share together. And so I tend to get a little fast if I get excited. So turn your ears up a little bit. So Naomi recognizes, okay, so this is working for now. They're gleaning out of the harvest field, but what happens when the harvest is over and there's nothing else to glean? What kind of future is there yet, or is there one, for Ruth specifically? Well, let's go back to what she said. She said that, oh, you were in Boaz's field. Oh, she recognizes God's providence in this because he is a close relative. In fact, he says he is one of our closest relatives. Now, that's a very particular word. The Hebrew word is the word goel. If we were going to use English letters, we could just say G-O with kind of an apostrophe E-L, goel, in my best Hebrew accent, I guess. But it's a very particular and peculiar word, a very special word. So it's not just, hey, he's one of our closest cousins, but there's a particular title that's associated with this word. Let me show you what I mean. Turn to the book of Leviticus, chapter 25, and this word is used a couple of different ways. It's a combination kind of meaning. Closest relative. Now, if you might have a different word in your translation. I have a marginal note next to that word, and if you look in the margin in the New American Standard, it says, or redeemer. In Leviticus chapter 25, I would have sort of parachute in the middle of verse 25. So Leviticus 25, verse 25. If a fellow countryman of yours becomes so poor that he has to sell part of his property, then his nearest kinsman, or closest relative, is to come and buy back what his relative has sold. That's exactly what's about to happen. You remember that Naomi's husband sold out because of the famine. They go to Moab. Well, then after he and the sons die, Naomi comes back. But she doesn't own that land anymore. That's why she's living in town. She doesn't have that farm anymore. Well, the book of Leviticus is talking about this. So if you have to sell because of poverty, or verse 26, we're back in Leviticus 25, verse 26. For in case a man has no kinsman, but so recovers his means as to find sufficient for its redemption, then he shall calculate the years since its sale, refund the balance to the man to whom he sold it, and so return his property. So what happens is, because when the Hebrews come into the promised land and they'll become the Israelites, right? The land will be divided up among the 12 tribes. The Levites not being given a land inheritance because they're going to be supported by the other 11, that they might be the tribe of priests. But the rest have been given an allotment based on the tribe or based on the family. And so the land must stay in the family. That means that temporarily it could be sold, but in the year of Jubilee, every 49 years, it's coming back, and that keeps the land inheritance or the land promise, that keeps it in the family. But the word here is, or the idea is, if someone's so poor they have to sell their land, the nearest kinsman can come and buy it back, bring it back into the family. And so that's what the word redemption means, to buy back, to redeem something. If you go to the store and you redeem a coupon, you're exchanging it, you're giving it back in order for whatever the discount is or the deal or the free product or whatever. But it means to go back. In this case specifically, to buy back. So Boaz is the Goel, is the nearest kinsman, the closest relative, so he can buy back the land that's Naomi's or her husband's, and thus that will bring provision for the family. Now, what will come with that, we'll notice in chapter 3 or chapter 4, is then the widow associated with that is a part of that. In other words, you've got to bring her into your home and household as well. That's the point, is to keep the family provided for. So it's the idea of someone who will purchase the land back, so that's good. But there's also another interesting use of this word. Turn to Numbers chapter 35. Numbers 35. So the word Goel is nearest kinsman in the sense of the Redeemer, the one who is able to, and in many ways expected to, perhaps even required to purchase the land back. Certainly they have the option to do so. But that's not the only way the word is used. Perhaps an even more interesting use of the word is found in Numbers chapter 35 in the idea of the cities of refuge and justice. So in verse 6, Moses, by the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, is giving them this teaching, right? Verse 35, verse 1, now the Lord spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan opposite Jericho, and then begins to give them this teaching. Verse 6, the cities which you shall give to the Levites shall be the 6 cities of refuge. What does that mean? Which you shall give for the manslayer to flee to. In addition to them, you shall give 42 cities. The manslayer, someone who kills somebody, has a city they can run to, they can get to for refuge in order for there to be a trial. See, we take for granted our own legal system, but what this does is provide a safe haven or a safe place until justice can be determined. What that stops is a reaction, a lynching or a riot, or justice rushed or poorly served isn't actually justice. And he talks about how that works. Like verse 9, he says, then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the sons of Israel, and say to them, when you cross the Jordan in the land of Judah, Canaan, you shall select for yourselves cities to be your cities of refuge, that the manslayer who has killed any person unintentionally may flee. And then he's going to go on and talk about, we typically, in our legal system, we'll talk about first-degree murder, second-degree murder, we'll talk about manslaughter, because if you kill someone, there are different levels of consequence, because it all has to do with why did it happen. So we call first-degree murder that premeditated, we call it cold-blooded. You decide you're going to kill somebody, you lay an ambush, you make the plan, here they come, and you kill them. That's cold-blooded murder. We say first-degree murder. Now, I'm not a legal expert, so I'm going to be a little fuzzy here or broad. Second-degree murder is typically recognized as it was a crime of passion, that you walked in on something, or they made you really mad, and so you struck out against them and you did mean to harm them, but you were really being motivated by passion or circumstance or reaction. It's still murder and there are consequences. First degree is that I don't like you, whatever. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to plan for it. So a month from now, I'm going to lay an ambush and all that. It's not a reaction. It's premeditated. That's the coldest, harshest kind of act. Secondly, it's more of a reaction. And then there's manslaughter, which is, sure enough, you killed somebody, but you didn't mean to, right? That you made some poor choices. You were driving too fast. You shouldn't have been driving that fast. You were being irresponsible. And so you went through the curve and you went across the line. You collided with another car and you killed them. You did not intend to kill them. You didn't even know. It was not a crime of passion because you weren't even thinking about them. But because of your choices, somebody dies. And then maybe the fourth level would be just an accident. Maybe you're driving along and the front tire blows out and it causes your car to swerve and you collide with somebody, or maybe you run over somebody walking on the sidewalk. And so, yes, you killed them, but it was absolutely an accident, which means it was not your fault at all. So, in other words, it's one thing to say you took someone's life, but there's a whole lot of different ways that happens. Perhaps. And that's what this text is going into. Killed any person, last part of verse 11, unintentionally may flee there. Verse 12, the city shall be to you as a refuge from the avenger. Now that's the same word. So Goel is the nearest kinsman or closest relative who then has the right and authority to redeem or buy back land that's been sold out of, say, desperation or desperate need. But then also you have a responsibility to bring justice or to avenge someone who has been wronged. Verse 12, the city shall be to you as a refuge from the avenger, that's the word, so that the manslayer will not die until he stands before the congregation for trial. So the cities of refuge, which gives it a buffer, let some time pass, let passions cool, so that there's time to determine, well, what's actually happened. And that's the difference, you see, between a riot or, what's another word? Where, like we hear it used in terms of mafia, you took out one of our people, we're going to take out one of your people, so it's just revenge. It's not justice. Let's see, he continues to talk about that, about the 6 cities, the different cities. Like verse 15, these 6 cities shall be refuge for the sons of Israel, for the alien and for the sojourner among them, that if anyone who kills a person unintentionally may flee there. But notice how the language changes. We kind of move from manslaughter to first-degree murder, if you will, in verse 16. But if he struck him down with an iron object so that he died, he is a murderer, and the murderer shall surely be put to death. If he struck him down with a stone in his hand, by which he will die, as a result he died, he is a murderer. Because that's picking up a weapon, right? That's intentional. Or verse 18, if you struck him with a wooden object in the hand by which he might die, in other words, you did it so that he might die. As a result, he died. He be a murderer. And the murderer shall surely be put to death. Verse 19, the blood avenger himself shall put the murderer to death. He shall put him to death when he flees him. It goes on to talk about if he pushed him out of hatred, or if he threw something at him lying in wait. If he dies, then he shall be put to death. The blood avenger shall put the murderer to death when he meets him. Contrast. So if you intended to hurt them, right? Well, I guess maybe we would call this first or second degree. First degree is premeditated. Second degree perhaps is that crime of passion. He says here, out of hatred. We take for granted that our legal system comes from the roots of this very teaching. Verse 22, but if he pushed him suddenly without enmity, or threw something at him without lying in wait, or with any deadly object of stone, and he didn't see it dropped on him, and then he dies, while he was not his enemy, he was not seeking his injury, then the congregation shall judge between the slayer and the blood avenger according to these ordinances, etc. And so it's determining, okay, well, why has this happened? Because there can be an important difference. The point is, the word goel is the blood avenger. So not only do you have the idea of the Redeemer, the one who is going to buy you back, but it's also the one who will avenge, or who will make things right, or who will bring justice on your behalf. And so when Naomi says, Boaz, well, he's our goel, there's so much loaded in this idea that he is the one who can not only buy back the land, but he's also the one that can make things right for us. You got to turn to Job chapter 19, maybe one of the most beautiful verses, certainly on this subject. In Job chapter 19, we're in the midst of Job's suffering and all that's gone on. And he says in verse 23 of Job 19, he says, "Oh, that my words were written, oh, that they were inscribed in a book with an iron stylus and lead, they were engraved in a rock forever." And I love how something like over 4,000 years later, we're reading you, Job, we're hearing you. And here's what he says in verse 25. "As for me," remember, he's in the middle of his suffering. There's no light at the end of the tunnel yet. "As for me, I know that my Redeemer lives." He uses the same word, goel, my Redeemer. That his Redeemer who can purchase him back, and his Avenger, the one who's on his side, the one who will make things right, the one who will bring justice on his behalf. "As for me, I know that my Redeemer lives, and at last he will take his stand on the earth. Even after my skin is destroyed, yet from my flesh I shall see God, whom I myself shall behold, whom my eyes will see, and not another. My heart faints within me." Remember that Job is in the context of all this suffering while his friends are saying, "It's your fault, you must be a horrible person," kind of language. And that's not right. And it's his goel who will make things right, who will avenge him, or who will defend him, or who will represent him. It is a beautiful and powerful picture of Jesus. Turn to the 119th Psalm. We'll look at one more example of this amazing word. It's scattered throughout the Hebrew Old Testament. The 119th Psalm, the 153rd verse. That's a lot of numbers. The 119th Psalm and verse 153. David says, "Look upon my affliction and rescue me, for I do not forget your law. Plead my case and redeem me." There's the word. "Revive me according to your word." So there's the plead my case. That's the avenger. That's someone who takes my side, someone who represents me, someone who makes sure that all things are made right. Plead my case and redeem me. So the word goel is an amazing mixture here of rescuer and avenger. And an avenger in the righteous sense, not about, somebody that just wreaks havoc, but someone who saves me and who makes things right. You think about just what it's like to live through an experience of injustice, or you're treated wrongly or unfairly or unjustly, and how we suffer like a physical pain, like physical suffering if someone wrongs us, but when we're wronged, it's like a character assassination. There's a physical kind of pain in one sense, but then there's this other that's about our character. It's about who we are. Like this isn't right. Like this is not me. Like this is I'm not being treated right. And I'm not talking about just being spoiled or enlightened, but entitled is the word I meant. But just when something genuinely is done wrong, even when we see it with others, if someone comes up with a great idea and they do all the work and they've developed it, and then somebody else takes credit for it and they steal it, and now they get all the fame and they get all the money, and this person continues destitute. You hear those kind of stories and it stirs something. Like, that's not right. That's what the avenger makes right. Who brings justice. And so when she says this, so Ruth comes in with all this extra food, Naomi's like, "Wow, you really had a good day. Like, how did this go?" "Well, I worked in this field." And, "Well, whose field was it?" "Well, it was Boaz's field." Boaz is the goel. And so what happens now in the book of Ruth is suddenly Boaz is given to us as a picture of Christ, as a picture of Jesus rescuing us. Watch how this continues in chapter 3. So Naomi says, "Well, we got to do something about this. You need to have a future. And after all," verse 2, "now is not Boaz our kinsman, with whose maids you were? So I tell you what you need to do is you need to, verse 3, you need to wash yourself, therefore, and anoint yourself and put on your best clothes and go down to the threshing floor. But you need to wait until he's finished eating and drinking. So make yourself as attractive as you can. It's hard not to immediately want to jump to the parallels between Christ and his church and how he washes us and adorns us, or how he talks about in Ephesians chapter 5 how Christ lifts up the church holy and spotless and without blemish, having been washed and sanctified. I mean, it's just, there's some beautiful parallels here. But she's telling Ruth to wash herself, make herself as presentable as possible. And then she says in verse 4 that when he lies down, that you notice where he lies down, and go and uncover his feet and lie down, then he will tell you what you shall do. Uncover his feet. That's an interesting cultural implication there. So whether you're talking blanket, probably he has something like more like a great cloak, an outer cloak, he wraps himself up in to sleep in. So just lift that up and expose his feet. There's a big cultural thing that's happening we'll talk about in a second. In verse 5, Ruth continues to show us her wisdom and her faith when she says, all that you say, I will do. Because she understands what there's a purpose. What Naomi is doing is telling Ruth to offer herself. Well, she's willing to do that. So sure enough, in verse 6, she goes down to the threshing floor, this hard-packed area where the wheat's going to be broken up either by oxen or them pulling sleds or rocks and breaking up the grain, and then they'll separate it with a winnowing fork. It's the harvest, and they're going to celebrate because that's the harvest. Here's all their income all piled up. Here's their year's worth of work. And remember, the whole reason that Naomi and her family left Israel was because of the famine. So this is not famine. This is good. They've had a good year. Verse 7, when Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Now, what kind of frustrates me is, I guess, in the search for drama, sometimes people like to read in some unholy kinds of situations, that this is somehow Boaz is drunk out of his mind and she does something kind of lascivious or something unseemly. And that's not the case at all, because what the text says is he had eaten and drunk. It didn't say he was drunk. It means he has drank. That's past tense, right? That after he had eaten and after he had also drank something, it doesn't mean he's drunk. That's just the past tense verb. Because if this is a drunken, out of his mind kind of debauchery kind of scene, what happened to who Boaz is and how he was tender toward her and how he was careful with her and how he protected her? And then now all of a sudden we paint Ruth as some kind of lascivious woman or some kind of loose woman, when that's not what's said at all. All it means is that Boaz has celebrated as you would expect. What would you do if you have worked all year and then the harvest has come in and you've been provided for? Then there would be a feast, there would be a party, there would be a festival. That doesn't mean at all that it has to be ungodly, because that's not Boaz's character. And that's revealed even in the way that he treats her, because he doesn't take any advantage over her. He does it after all that. Don't insult her, don't rebuke her. That's not going to change. So they enjoy, they have a big meal. And what do we do on Thanksgiving? Do we not eat and drink and be merry? And that's as godly as it can be. You have this big old meal and you have, 47 glasses of iced tea, and then then you're ready for a nap. And that's what we're seeing. There's this celebration. So then he lies down. And so she comes secretly and he uncovers his feet and lays down. She doesn't do anything else. Now, what does it mean to uncover his feet? Well, let's keep reading. It happened in the middle of the night that the man was startled because, eventually the cold draft, and he's like, my feet are uncovered. And that being awakened, he recognizes someone's here. So he bent forward, and there's a woman lying in his feet. And he says, who are you? And she answered, I am Ruth, your maid. So spread your covering over your maid, for you are a close relative. What she says is, spread your covering over me, for you are my Redeemer. Now, having said everything about Redeemer, she's not asking for something that is somehow untoward or something ungodly. The phrase she uses, spread your covering over me, there's a reason why Naomi said, go uncover his feet. There's a cultural thing happening. Turn to Deuteronomy chapter 27. There's a couple of places that we can look to understand what is meant by this particular expression. Deuteronomy chapter 27, in the middle of this conversation, you'll notice in verse 20, various things that should not be done. Verse 20 says, Deuteronomy 27, verse 20, cursed is he who lies with his father's wife. And then listen to the language, because he has uncovered his father's skirt. And all the people shall say, amen. So there is an expression, a cultural way of speaking, that a husband covers his wife. That's the idea of protection. That's the idea of providing for. Let's go to the book of Ezekiel. Here's a beautiful picture. It's not in any way somehow purely sexual or ungodly or lascivious or anything like that, because the same expression is going to be used of God. So that's how we know that it can be a good and godly way of speaking. In the book of Ezekiel chapter 16, we use a different expression. For example, we say when a prospective son-in-law comes to the father-in-law and says, can I have your daughter's hand in marriage? That's an expression that we use culturally. You could say, if you weren't from the culture, you might say, well, you can have her hand, but you got to have all of her. You're not going to chop off your daughter's hand and hand that to him, are you? Cultural expressions can be weird if you take them straight up literal, and there's lots of examples of that. But in Ezekiel chapter 16, listen to how the same expression is used. God is talking about Israel and how he's loved Israel and how he saw her since she was born. It's her origin story, and how he's cared for her and watched over her. And saw her grow up and protected. It's a little bit like the Boaz and Ruth story, because Boaz is older than Ruth. Well, of course, here God is older. Talks about Israel being born and grew up as a fine young woman. Verse 8, then I passed by you and saw you, and behold, you were at the time for love. So I spread my skirt over you and covered your nakedness. I also swore to you and entered into a covenant with you, so that you became mine, declares the Lord God. So this covering with your skirt is not some sort of bizarre sexual innuendo. It is a holy and beautiful expression of marriage, because God describes himself doing this. And even in this text, spread my skirt over you and cover your nakedness. So we got the negative version in Deuteronomy, don't be taking the skirt off, because that's not yours to do, talking about with your father's wife. Here's the positive. God covers Israel with his skirt so that they are covered, their nakedness is covered. That means that they are protected, they're provided for, that there's no shame there. And then he says, and entered into a covenant with you so that you became mine. That's marriage, right? So we're not talking about a fling, we're talking about marriage. So let's go back to Ruth chapter 3. What Naomi tells Ruth then is stunning. You need to watch where he goes, go over and then uncover his feet, because that is culturally a request for marriage. And that's why when Ruth says back up in verse 5, all that you say, I will do. Now, she's met Boaz and knows that he's a good man, knows that he's a godly man, knows that he's a mighty man of godly character. So she's certainly willing. And so here Boaz has had a good festival, a good celebration, because God has blessed him with a great crop. And then in the middle of the night, he finds his feet uncovered, and that's weird. And then, there's a woman, and she said specifically, spread your covering over your maid. Marry me. Take me into your home. I want to be your wife, for you are a close relative. The parallel between this and Ezekiel 16 is just beautiful. That's the very thing we do with Christ, is that we offer We submit, we humble ourselves, we place ourselves in his care as a church is described as the bride of Christ. To make this anything other than holy and wholesome and godly is just so unfortunate, because verse 10 says, then he said, so Boaz says, when she makes this request, basically, take me as your wife, then he said, may you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter. Not only is the Lord's name often on Naomi's lips, so it is on Boaz's. He's a godly man. And proof in the pudding, he doesn't do anything with her, because that's not what's happening. There is a marriage request, and Boaz is kind of blown away. May you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter, not you foreigner, not you Moabitess, my daughter. You have shown your last kindness to be better than the first by not going after young men, whether poor or rich. I mean, she should have gone for someone her own age, and yet she goes for someone she trusts, someone she knows is godly, someone that will care for her. He says, I will do for you whatever you ask, for all my people in the city know that you are a woman of excellence. Again, that's how you know this is so precious, this is so godly, this is so holy what she's doing, because he recognizes her as a woman of excellence. Now, he does say in verse 12, now it is true I'm a close relative, but there's somebody closer. He'll have to clear that up in chapter 4. Verse 13, remain this night when morning comes. If he will redeem you, good, let him redeem you. But if he does not wish to redeem you, then I will redeem you as the Lord lives. So he places this plan again in the Lord's will, what the Lord allows. Lie down until morning. Well, she's there till early morning, and then he says, go on. In verse 14 and 15, because for her to leave before anybody recognizes she's there protects his reputation and hers. Well, then why didn't he send her away immediately in the middle of the night? Well, it wouldn't be safe for her to be traveling in the middle of the night. Stay here, you're safe with me, and then early in the morning she's able to go on, and then Boaz is going to move heaven and earth in chapter 4 to bring about this promise or to fulfill this request. So Ruth is a wise woman because she trusts her Goel. She offers herself to the Goel, not just in a moment, but for her life. She offers herself and says, take me into your heart, take me as your wife, take me into your home. And so Boaz is going to cover her with his skirt. That is, he's going to marry her in chapter 4. And we'll need to finish that up in the next lesson. And there's something really just wonderful about how all that works out in chapter 4. And I think a little bit humorous. And it certainly involves, we've already had a skirt involved. We're going to have a sandal involved, which is, again, another example of a cultural expression that has a pretty interesting background as well. The good news is you and I have a Goel, Jesus Christ, who is our Redeemer. He buys us back, and he is our Avenger. He makes all things right with us and for us and in us. If we would just, like Ruth, be wise enough to recognize he's our Goel. So let's go to him and say, please take me under your protection. I trust you with everything that I am and ever will be. And there is such peace and joy in that.
The ground began to shake, the stone was rolled away. His perfect love could not be overcome. Now death, where is your sting? Our resurrected King has rendered you defeated. Forever he is glorified. Forever he is lifted high. Forever he is risen. He is alive. He is alive. hallelujah. We sing hallelujah. The Lamb is overcome. We sing hallelujah. We sing hallelujah. We sing hallelujah. The Lamb is overcome. Forever He is glorified. Forever He is lifted high. Forever He is risen. He is alive.